Your family, Claire. You have to save him. Those were the words my father said to me right before my older brother, Julian, slid a demand notice for $310,000 across the dining room table. For 5 years, my family treated Julian like a business genius who built an empire from the ground up, while treating me like an invisible employee who was lucky to have a desk in his building. They had no idea Julian spent the last 2 years running that company into the ground with reckless spending, private leases, and unauthorized loans. Now he needed me to bail him out to avoid financial ruin. My father told me I had no choice. My mother called me selfish for hesitating. Julian smugly told me to sign the paperwork. I didn't argue. I just pulled out my phone, made one call to the chief financial officer, and asked him to bring the official ownership ledger into the room. My name is Claire Vance. I'm 34 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my family treated my older brother, Julian, like he was made of gold. Julian was charming, loud, and tall, the kind of person who could walk into a room with zero preparation and convince everyone he was the smartest man there. I was the opposite. I was the quiet one with a degree in corporate finance and a master's in logistics. The daughter who spent her weekends analyzing supply chain models while Julian chased get-rich-quick schemes funded by our parents. Our father, Harold, always believed that men were built to run companies and women were built to support them. So 5 years ago, when I spotted a massive gap in regional freight routing and designed the framework for Apex Logistics, my father gave me a blunt ultimatum. If you want this family's blessing, Julian has to be the face. No client will trust a 30-something woman over a man with presence. Julian didn't have a clue how freight manifests or client retention worked, but he had charisma. I didn't care about public vanity. I cared about building a viable high-margin enterprise. So I agreed to let him act as the public-facing CEO on one condition. I drew up the legal framework entirely through my private attorney. I funded the initial $150,000 seed capital, built every operational protocol, and brought on every major shipping contract from behind the scenes. To the world and to my parents, Julian was the self-made founder. At family dinners, my mother, Eleanor, would brag endlessly about Julian's genius, casually reminding me how lucky I was that my brother gave me a comfortable job as his back-office manager. I never corrected them. I let Julian enjoy the photo ops and the expensive dinners while I quietly ran the actual business. But giving Julian executive authority without constant supervision turned out to be the biggest mistake of my life, because behind that polished image he was quietly digging a financial grave. The ambush came on a Sunday evening during what was supposed to be a casual family dinner at my parents' house. The moment I stepped through the front door, the atmosphere felt suffocating. My mother hadn't set out her usual festive spread. Instead, the dining table held nothing but half-empty glasses of water, an unopened bottle of scotch, and a thick manila folder resting squarely in front of Julian's chair. Julian was pacing by the bay windows, nervously adjusting the cuffs of his tailored shirt, avoiding my gaze entirely. My father sat at the head of the table with his arms folded, his face set in that rigid authoritarian scowl he used whenever he was about to issue an order. "Sit down, Claire," my father said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We have a critical family matter to resolve before tomorrow morning." I took a seat across from Julian, setting my purse on the floor. "What's going on?" Julian finally sat down, exhaling loudly as if he were carrying the weight of the entire world. He didn't speak. He simply opened the folder, pulled out a stack of red-stamped legal notices and financial statements, and slid them across the polished mahogany table directly in front of me. I looked down at the top sheet. It was a formal default notice from a commercial lender demanding immediate repayment of $310,000, with interest accruing daily and a strict deadline set for Monday at noon. Julian took out a few bridge loans to expand operations, my father stated flatly, his tone brook no argument. The market shifted, a few client deals were delayed, and the creditors are getting aggressive. This cannot touch his credit, and it certainly cannot become public. It would ruin his reputation. I flipped through the pages. The expenses weren't operational. There were invoices for a leased Porsche Taycan 5-star resort bookings in Miami, private golf club memberships, and several transfers to an unverified crypto trading desk. "This isn't business debt," I said, looking up, meeting Julian's eyes. "This is personal squandering. Why is this on the company's corporate line?" "That doesn't matter right now," my mother cut in sharply, leaning over my shoulder. "What matters is protecting your brother. You have nearly 200,000 in your personal investment fund, and your townhouse has plenty of equity to take out a second mortgage. You'll wire the funds first thing in the morning to clear his balance. Julian leaned back in his chair, folding his hands behind his head with a faint, smug smirk. Look at it as an investment, Claire. Your family. It's basically our money anyway. I stared at Julian, then at my parents, feeling the last traces of familial warmth drain out of me. No, I said quietly. The dining room went completely silent for 2 whole seconds before the dam broke. My father slammed both palms flat against the table, rattling the glassware. What do you mean no? Your brother's entire future is on the line, Claire. You wouldn't even have a career if he hadn't given you a desk at Apex. Harold is right, my mother snapped, her voice trembling with indignation. You have always been so rigid, so resentful of Julian's success. You sit on your savings while your own flesh and blood faces disaster? It's pure selfishness. Julian shook his head with exaggerated disappointment. Come on, Claire. Stop being petty. It's 300 grand. Once we close the Q4 accounts, I'll pay you back. But if you let them freeze our operating accounts tomorrow, the whole firm goes under and you lose your job anyway. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry, and I didn't argue with their absurd version of reality. Instead, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and unlocked the screen. What are you doing? Julian asked, his brow furrowing. Looking at your bank app? Good. Just tell me you'll wire it. I ignored him and dialed a direct extension. The line rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered on speakerphone. Good evening, Claire, said Mark Alvarez, the chief financial officer of Apex Logistics. Evening, Mark, I replied, keeping my eyes fixed on my brother. Are you still at the downtown office? Yes, I just finished pulling the Q3 forensic audit you requested on Friday. Good, I said calmly. I need you to bring the master corporate charter, the current shareholder ledger, and the emergency board resolutions over to my parents' house in River Forest. Right now. Mark didn't hesitate. I have the courier folder ready in my briefcase. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Thank you, Mark. See you shortly. I ended the call and placed my phone face down on the mahogany table. Julian burst into a loud, mocking laugh. You called Mark? You idiot. Mark reports directly to me. Did you think you could convince the CFO to authorize a company loan for your brother without my signature? I'm the CEO, Claire. You just wasted his Sunday evening. We'll see, I said, leaning back and folding my hands. Let's wait for Mark. 25 minutes later, the front doorbell chimed through the tense silence of the house. My father scoffed, standing up to answer it. I'm going to apologize to this poor man for my daughter dragging him into a private family argument. A moment later, Mark Alvarez walked into the dining room. He was in his late 40s, impeccably sharp in a navy suit, carrying a heavy leather briefcase. He took one look at the room, stepped past my father, and walked directly over to where I was sitting. Evening, Claire, Mark said, setting the briefcase on the mahogany table with a solid thud. I brought the original incorporation filings, the certified cap table, and the forensic expenditure summary. Julian stood up immediately, puffing out his chest and putting on his best boardroom smile. Mark, thanks for coming, but my sister had no right to call you here. As CEO, I'm ordering you to step outside with me so we can handle this privately. Mark didn't look at Julian. He didn't even acknowledge his outstretched hand. Instead, Mark unlatched the briefcase, pulled out a thick blue binder labeled Apex Holdings LLC, and placed a single notarized document directly in front of my father and mother. What is this? My father muttered, adjusting his reading glasses. That is the legally binding shareholder registry of Apex Logistics, Mark stated in a flat, clinical tone. Claire Vance owns 78% of all voting shares through CV Enterprises. Julian Vance owns 12% non-voting sweat equity, contingent upon compliance with his executive contract. Julian's face went dead white. The smug grin vanished as if he had been slapped across the face. What? That's impossible. I'm the founder. I'm on the website, I'm on the building plaque. You're a hired executive, Julian, I said, my voice steady and cold. You always were. You signed that agreement 5 years ago when I put up the money to create Apex. You wanted the title, the spotlight, and the executive salary. I gave you all 3. But I kept total control of the company. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. Claire, You lied to us? I protected my investment from the start, I replied. Mark opened the second folder, laying out a color-coded breakdown of Julian's unauthorized expenses. Over the last 18 months, Mr. Vance has misappropriated $310,000 in corporate credit lines for personal luxuries without majority shareholder approval. Under Section 4B of his employment contract, this constitutes gross breach of fiduciary duty. I pulled a pen from my purse, signed the termination decree Mark had already prepared, and slid it toward my brother. Effective at midnight tonight, Julian, you are terminated as CEO of Apex Logistics. Mark has already locked your corporate accounts, revoked your building access, and notified our legal team. The $310,000 debt remains under your personal guarantee with the lenders. The company is not paying a single penny. Julian collapsed back into his chair, staring at the termination order with his mouth hanging open, while my parents sat frozen in absolute disbelief. The silence in the room was heavy, broken only by the sound of Mark packing his briefcase and stepping outside to wait in his car. My father was the first to speak, but his booming authority was completely gone, replaced by a desperate tremor. Claire, you can't do this to your brother. He's family. If word gets out that you fired him, he'll never get another executive role in this city. His life will be ruined. Julian ruined his own life when he treated my company like his private piggy bank, I replied, standing up and slinging my purse over my shoulder. My mother began to weep, reaching out to grasp my arm. Claire, please. You have the money. You own the company. Just absorb the debt as a business loss. Protect your brother. I gently pulled my arm away. For 5 years, you told me I was nothing more than an assistant living in his shadow. You were willing to drain my life savings and put a second mortgage on my home just to save his pride. I am not setting myself on fire to keep him warm. I walked out the front door and drove home. Over the next 6 months, the fallout was swift and absolute. Julian had to sell his luxury sports car, surrender his high-rise apartment lease, and liquidate every personal asset he had to settle with the commercial lenders. He ended up taking an entry-level sales job at a mid-tier freight broker, earning an honest commission for the first time in his life. My parents tried calling and texting for weeks, cycling between frantic apologies and bitter accusations, until I finally set firm boundaries and told them I needed space. On Monday morning, I walked into Apex Logistics and called an all-hands meeting. I introduced myself not as the quiet operations manager, but as the founder, majority owner, and acting CEO. We restructured our accounts, eliminated the wasteful spending, and within 2 quarters our profit margins surged by 40%. Looking back, sitting in the corner office that was always rightfully mine, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel peace. Family should be a source of support, not a blank check for entitlement. Sometimes, the only way to earn respect is to stop staying quiet, step out of the shadows, and show the world exactly who built the empire.